It was one of those evenings in early November when London seemed to draw a heavy, suffocating breath and held it close to its chest. The fog was so thick that it seemed to seep through every crack and crevice of the city, pressing against the window panes of 221B Baker Street like a living, whispering creature. The gas lamps outside cast a pale, flickering glow that barely pierced the murky veil, cleansing the streets in eerie, otherworldly ambiance. Even the distant clatter of horse-drawn cabs on the cobblestones was muted, swallowed by the damp chill that settled deep into the bones. Chapter 01. Inside our flat, the atmosphere was more inviting, but no less charged with a certain tension. Holmes was at his usual post by the fireplace, though not in his customary chair. Instead, he was standing, one hand stroking his temple, the other clutching his violin with the grip of a man possessed by restless thought. His sharp profile was outlined by the dancing flames, and the faint scent of pipe tobacco lingered in the air, mingling with the faintest trace of chemicals from some recent experiment. I sat nearby, quietly sipping what had long since cooled to lukewarm, the mundane warmth of the tea, a poor match for the chill pressing on my spirits. I was reflecting on the peculiar nature of my existence as Holmes's companion, a man whose life could be so quickly appended by the arrival of a stranger with a mystery so strange that reason itself seemed to wobble. The quiet of the evening was suddenly interrupted by a brisk knock on the door, sharp and insistent. Holmes's eyes flicked toward the sound, keen and alert. "Watson, it seems our evening will be far from dull," he said, his voice low and filled with an excitement that betrayed the slightest smile tugging at the corner of his lips. I rose and opened the door to reveal a visitor whose appearance was striking not for flamboyance, but for the shadow of anxiety that clung to him like a second skin. He was a man of considerable bearing, tall and lean, with the posture of someone accustomed to command, yet his finely tailored coat was somewhat rumpled. Decay and the pallor of his face suggested sleepless nights, or worse. His eyes were deep-set, a sharp gray, but rimmed with red, as if he had been struggling to hold back some great worry. "Good evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice steady, but edged with urgency. "I am Lord Reginald Ashcroft, of Ashcroft Manor, Hertfordshire." He hesitated briefly before continuing. "I come to you in the hope that you, Mr. Holmes, might shed light on a matter that has brought my household to the brink of despair." Holmes gestured for him to sit, and I took the liberty of placing a fresh cup of tea before the visitor, who accepted it with a faint nod of gratitude, but no relief in his eyes. Lord Ashcroft's story began quietly, but quickly gathered the weight of something deeply troubling. "Last night," he explained, "I awoke to find an envelope slid beneath my bedroom door. No footfalls, no sound to betray the hand that left it. It bears a seal I do not recognize, crimson wax insignia stamped, with a symbol unfamiliar even to my family's heraldry." He carefully produced the letter, folding it out with a trembling hand. The paper was thick and yellowed at the edges, the ink dark and flowing. But the message itself was as puzzling as it was chilling. A brief note warning of unseen eyes, an impending reckoning. The language was archaic, almost cryptic, yet carried a venomous weight that left no doubt as to its intent. "But that is not all," Lord Ashcroft added, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Last evening, my valet, Thomas, disappeared without a trace. He was a loyal servant, trusted beyond question. No note, no sign of struggle, nothing. The police have searched the grounds and surrounding village, but found no clue." I watched Holmes closely as he took the letter from Lord Ashcroft and held it to the light, his eyes narrowing. He examined the seal first, then the script, and, finally, the paper itself, his fingers brushing lightly over the fibers as though attempting to glean a hidden message through touch alone. "Curious," Holmes murmured. "The seal is unfamiliar to me as well." Its design is intricate, several interlocking shapes, but nothing immediately recognizable as a family crest or known society. The paper appears aged artificially, yet the ink is quite fresh. He paced, slowly, his mind evidently working through the possibilities. A threat delivered under cover of darkness. A loyal servant vanished. These facts suggest more than simple mischief. The language of the letter implies a vendetta or warning that runs deeper than mere blackmail. Lord Ashcroft's face was a mask of worry, yet there was a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Can you help us, Mr. Holmes? We are at a loss." Holmes folded the letter deliberately and returned it to its envelope, now with a certain reverence. "Mr. Ashcroft, you must understand, these matters rarely present themselves in straightforward fashion. What is left unsaid is often more important than what is spoken. Okay?" He turned suddenly to me, eyes alight with that familiar spark. "Watson, have you noticed anything in our visitor's demeanor or in the letter itself that suggests a deeper truth?" I paused, considering. The man's anxiety seems genuine, but his manner also carries a stiffness, as though he is accustomed to maintaining control despite turmoil. The letter's archaic language is curious, perhaps intended to mislead or to evoke fear rooted in some family history. Holmes nodded slowly. "Good, Watson. You are already attuned to subtleties many would overlook." The visitor shifted uneasily in his seat. "The household is in chaos. Thomas was more than a servant. He knew many secrets. I fear what his absence might mean." Holmes inclined his head thoughtfully. "Secrets, you say? Secrets are the currency of blackmail and betrayal." He pulled a small magnifying glass from his coat pocket and began a detailed examination of the seal once more, tracing the fine lines with a practiced eye. "I shall require access to Ashcroft Manor and to the rooms Thomas frequented. There may be traces something overlooked that will reveal the nature of this threat." Lord Ashcroft agreed readily, and we arranged to depart early the next morning. As the night deepened and the fog outside thickened, I found myself watching Holmes in a way I rarely allowed. His mind, as always, was a labyrinth of thought, weaving threads of logic and intuition into a tapestry no one but he could comprehend. Yet tonight, there was something different, a shadow behind the keen eyes, as if this case bore a weight even Holmes did not yet fully grasp. I pondered the letter's words and the sudden disappearance. How often had I seen Holmes puzzle out the truth from the tiniest detail, of stray ash on a sleeve, the faintest scent on a cufflink. Tonight, I sensed the puzzle was larger, more intricate, and laced with secrets that would test not only his intellect, but his very understanding of human nature. The fire crackled low as the clock on the mantelpiece chimed midnight, and I prepared to retire. But the thought lingered with me as I blew out the lamp. In all my years with Holmes, I had never encountered a mystery so delicately poised on the edge of something far darker than mere theft or murder. For now, we had only the letter and the vanished burlesque fragments of a story waiting to be told. The game, as Holmes said, was afoot, and I, once again, was ready to follow wherever it might lead. Through the fog and shadow of London's streets, into the heart of secrets better left undiscovered. The morning light struggled to penetrate the persistent London fog as Holmes, Lord Reginald Ashcroft, and I boarded a hansom cab bound for the Ashcroft estate. The streets were still slick with overnight drizzle, and the city seemed to hold its breath under the cloak of mist and muted sound. Holmes sat beside me, his sharp eyes darting restlessly between the passing buildings, as though cataloging each detail for later reflection. Lord Ashcroft was silent, his fingers nervously twisting a worn leather glove, the weight of his anxieties visibly pressing upon him. Our journey north to Hertfordshire took nearly 2 hours, crossing from the cramped, soot-stained alleys of London to the greener, more spacious environs of the countryside. The Ashcroft estate was an imposing presence, even from a distance, a sprawling manor of ancient stone. Ivy creeping along its walls, windows shuttered against the chill. The grounds were vast, dotted with leafless oaks and statues weathered by time, giving the property an air of faded grandeur that seemed fitting for the secrets it might conceal. Upon arrival, we were greeted by a steward who led us through the cavernous halls and richly furnished rooms, each telling its own story of lineage and legacy. Lord Ashcroft's footsteps echoed heavily, his discomfort plain in the stiffness of his gait. At last, we were ushered into a private sitting room where the tension in the air seemed to thicken. Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, Ashcroft began, his voice more composed than the previous night. Thank you for coming on such short notice. I feel I must provide you with all the facts, however mundane or unsettling they may seem. Holmes inclined his head slightly, signaling him to proceed. Lord Ashcroft took a deep breath. The letter you examined last night was but the beginning. Thomas, my valet, was a man of impeccable loyalty and discretion, yet he was aware of certain delicate matters concerning my family's affairs. His disappearance is not only a personal loss, but a threat to the stability of my household. He paused, searching our faces for a sign of understanding to the outside world. The Ashcrofts are a family of impeccable reputation, public service, charity, and tradition, but beneath the surface, there are fractures, disputes over inheritance, long-buried scandals, and resentments that simmer like embers beneath cold ashes. Holmes's eyes gleamed, though he said nothing, inviting Lord Ashcroft to continue. The letter, Ashcroft said, was peculiar not only in its wording, but also in what it did not say. It was a warning cloaked in metaphor, a puzzle in itself. I have consulted with local authorities, but their efforts have yielded no results. No ransom demands, no further threats. He reached into his coat pocket and produced a small ledger, worn at the edges. Thomas kept meticulous records of his duties and observations. I had hoped it might provide some clue, but I confess the entries are perplexing. Holmes took the ledger, flipping through its pages with characteristic rapidity. His eyes skimmed over the neat handwriting, lingering on certain entries that suggested a vigilance beyond that of a typical servant. Here, Holmes said, pointing to a line dated just 2 days prior. Thomas notes the arrival of an unannounced visitor, a man described only as a shadow in the rain. The entry is vague, but carries a hint of unease. Lord Ashcroft nodded gravely. Yes, the man came late one evening and was refused entry by the household staff. We have no record of his identity. I looked from Ashcroft to Holmes, sensing the gravity of the situation deepen. Is this visitor tie into the letter or Thomas's disappearance, you think? I asked. Holmes tapped his chin thoughtfully. Possibly, but before drawing conclusions, we must consider the letter's seal once more. Such an emblem is rarely used without significance. It may be a family symbol, a secret society's mark, or something far more obscure. Would you like to see the letter again? Lord Ashcroft offered. Holmes shook his head. No, I retain the details. It is the subtle aspects, the quality of the paper, the pressure of the seal, the way the ink sits, that often revealed the origin. He rose suddenly and began to pace the room, hands clasped behind his back. His gaze was distant, yet piercing, as though the very walls of the manor whispered secrets only he could hear. Watson, he said abruptly, have you noticed anything about the household or Lord Ashcroft's demeanor that might suggest something? Concealed. I reflected on the brief time spent at the manor. The manor itself exudes a palpable sense of faded glory. The rooms are richly decorated, but with an underlying chill, as if the past weighs heavily on the present. Lord Ashcroft's manner, while courteous, is strained. He carries a burden not easily shared. Holmes nodded approvingly. Excellent observations. The atmosphere of a place often mirrors the psychology of its inhabitants. At that moment, a sharp rap sounded at the door. The steward entered, bearing a small, wrapped package to Holmes. This was found in the garden near the east wing this morning. Holmes took the parcel and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a delicate silver locket, tarnished and worn, but unmistakably of great age. It was engraved with an intricate pattern of interwoven vines and a tiny, almost imperceptible inscription. To A. Always. A token of affection or a clue, Holmes murmured, eyes narrowing. And yet, why leave such an item where it could be found a message, perhaps? Lord Ashcroft appeared troubled. That belonged to my late wife. He'd disappeared some years ago during a minor theft at the estate. Its reappearance is unsettling. Holmes considered the locket carefully, weighing its significance. The timing is suspicious. It may be a taunt from the one who wishes to unsettle you, or a signpost meant to guide us toward the truth. We spent the afternoon in consultation, delving into the family's history, the estate staff, the many possible enemies Lord Ashcroft had amassed over the years. The conversation was punctuated by Holmes's frequent silences and sudden bursts of insight, the latter leaving me more baffled than enlightened. He seemed particularly interested in the household staff, their loyalties, their demeanors, their unspoken fears. Holmes requested a roster of employees and insisted on observing their routines firsthand. People leave footprints, he said cryptically, not always in the mud, but in their habits and hesitations. As evening descended, the manor took on an even more oppressive air. Shadows lengthened, and the flicker of candlelight seemed inadequate against the gloom pressing in through the tall windows. Holmes sat by the hearth, fingers steepled, eyes closed in concentration. It is clear, he finally said, that this is a case layered in deceit and concealed motives. Our task is to peel back these layers with patience and care. But, Watson, he added with a rare note of caution, there is something about this mystery that unsettles even me. I suspect we have not yet seen the true depth of these secrets. I looked at him, startled by the unusual gravity in his tone. What could be so troubling? Holmes opened his eyes, their sharpness undimmed. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those closest to home, cloaked not in shadow, but in trust. We must tread carefully, for in these halls, every whisper may conceal a threat, and every smile may mask a dagger. Lord Ashcroft rose, weary but resolute. I thank you, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson, I place my hope in your skill. As we prepared to retire for the night, I felt the full weight of the challenge ahead. The threads of this mystery were tangled deeply in the fabric of Ashcroft Manor, and the longer we remained, the more I sensed that the line between ally and adversary was perilously thin. Holmes remained silent for a moment before turning to me. Watson, the game is still very much afoot, but this time we must play with utmost caution. The secrets we seek are hidden not only in clues, but in the hearts of men. The fog outside deepened once more, cloaking the world in uncertain shadow. Within those shadows, I knew, lay the answers, waiting to be uncovered by Holmes's unparalleled mind. Chapter 02. The next morning dawned gray and unwelcoming. The persistent London fog having followed us north to Ashcroft Manor, its tendrils curling insidiously through the ancient oaks surrounding the estate. After a sparse breakfast, Holmes insisted that we begin our investigation immediately, eager to observe the household in its daily rhythms and to explore every corner of the manor where clues might hide. Chapter Stone. Facade of the manor loomed as we stepped out onto the damp gravel path. The groundskeeper, a surly man with a face weathered by years of frost and toil, glanced up but said nothing. Holmes barely spared him a glance, focusing instead on the subtle details, the way the frost lingered unevenly on the gravel, the faint scuff marks near the east wing. and the soft imprint of a boot near a gate left ajar. Every imperfection, Holmes murmured, speaks of passage and presence. Observe, Watson. Even a misplaced footprint can betray a secret. I followed him inside, where the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and faint traces of lavender, likely from the linen pressed by the housekeeper. The morning staff bustled about, with a mechanical precision that suggested routine rather than comfort. I noticed the occasional glances they exchanged, furtive and nervous, as if each feared what might be uncovered today. Holmes moved swiftly, yet with purpose. His eyes flicked over the portraits that lined the walls, each depicting stern-faced ancestors whose gaze seemed to follow us. He paused before one particularly severe gentleman in military uniform, running a finger over the plaque beneath. Dea, General who served with distinction. Holmes mused aloud, and likely a man of few compromises. Such legacies weigh heavily on descendants. Our first stop was Thomas's quarters, a modest room tucked away at the end of a long corridor. The chamber bore the faint signs of recent occupation: an unmade bed, a threadbare jacket draped carelessly over a chair, and a desk cluttered with small personal effects. Holmes knelt to examine the floor, noting dust patterns and faint indentations. "Look here, Watson," he said softly. "These marks indicate that the room was disturbed recently, but not violently. Whoever entered did so with care, perhaps out of respect or fear." He rifled through the drawers, pulling out a leather-bound notebook. The pages were filled with Thomas's meticulous script list of deliveries, notes on household repairs, and occasional cryptic comments. One entry caught Holmes's attention. "Strange visitor man in gray cloak, watched from shadows near the east gate." Holmes's lips curved into a faint smile. "Our shadow in the rain appears to have lingered longer than first thought." As we examined the room, a sudden noise startled us. A soft footfall behind the door. Holmes motioned for silence and pressed his ear to the wood. A hesitant knock followed, and then the door creaked open to reveal a young maid, her face pale and eyes wide with apprehension. I didn't mean to intrude, sir," she stammered. "I just wanted to say, Thomas was a good man. He never meant harm." Holmes's gaze softened. "We are not here to judge Miss Ellis, sir. Mary Ellis. I have served here 3 years." "Thank you, Mary. Any detail you can provide about Thomas's recent behavior or the visitor you mentioned would be most helpful." Mary glanced nervously toward the corridor. "Thomas was uneasy these last weeks. He kept glancing over his shoulder, scamped, and sometimes he spoke in whispers about watchers and the visitor. The man in the gray cloak came on the evening before Thomas vanished. Thomas said he had a message but would tell no one else." Holmes exchanged a glance with me. "Thank you, Mary. Your honesty is appreciated. You may leave us now." When the door closed, Holmes murmured, "The tension in this household runs deeper than fear of exposure. There is guilt here, or at least the weight of secrets not easily borne." We moved next to the east wing, where the visitor had supposedly been seen. The corridor was dim and lined with old tapestries, their colors faded by time and neglect. Holmes ran his fingers along the wall paneling, noting areas where the varnish had been worn away. At the far end, near a small door leading to the garden, he stopped abruptly. "This door, Watson, it is secured by a latch, yet we found it ajar yesterday. Notice the scratches here, likely caused by fingernails or a tool used to pry it open." He bent to examine the ground and pointed to a cluster of crushed leaves and broken twigs. "Someone entered or exited here in haste, but they left no obvious trail beyond this point." I looked beyond the door to the dense thicket of bushes, where the garden met the wild woods beyond the estate. It seems the visitor, or whoever it was, knew the grounds well. Holmes nodded, or was familiar enough to move unseen. It also raises questions about whether Thomas's disappearance was voluntary or forced. Our exploration continued in the servants' quarters, where the staff gathered in small clusters, whispering and casting nervous glances. Holmes approached with his usual tact, engaging briefly with the cook and the butler, noting inconsistencies between their accounts of Thomas's last days. The cook insisted Thomas had been cheerful, while the butler claimed he was withdrawn and distracted. Such contradictions were hardly surprising, but signaled that no one was entirely forthcoming. Holmes made careful mental notes. "Watson," he said quietly as we left the servants' wing, "observe how the servants' loyalties are divided. In a household rife with secrets, such divisions breed suspicion and concealment." The day wore on, with Holmes methodically gathering fragments of evidence, each seemingly insignificant, but, as always, carrying the potential to unlock the greater truth. He requested access to the estate's archives and family records, seeking connections that might explain the recent turmoil. By late afternoon, Holmes had settled at a heavy oak desk in the library. The room's high shelves laden with leather-bound tomes and faded manuscripts. He pulled from a shelf a large, dust-covered volume, a genealogical history of the Ashcroft family, and began scanning its pages with intense focus. "There are clues here, Watson," he said, without looking up. "Long-standing feuds, disputed wills, and rumors of a curse that has dogged this lineage for generations." I leaned over his shoulder, trying to make sense of the dense text. "A curse, you say?" Holmes smiled thinly. "Superstition, mostly. Yet often, such legends mask very human motives: greed, revenge, and the desire to conceal inconvenient truths." Suddenly, his finger paused on a passage describing the disappearance of a distant ancestor under suspicious circumstances. A century prior. The pattern was familiar. Sudden disappearance, whispered threats, and cryptic warnings. Holmes closed the book decisively. The past echoes in the present. Watson, we're not merely chasing a servant lost to us, but unearthing a shadow that has lingered long in the Ashcroft bloodline. Our investigations that day raised as many questions as answers, but Holmes remained undeterred, his mind alive with possibilities. I, meanwhile, felt the weight of unease settle over me, a sense that this case would demand more than mere observation and deduction, that it might test the very limits of our endurance and trust. As dusk fell and the manor was cloaked once more in twilight and whispering shadows, Holmes prepared for the next phase of our inquiry. He requested certain objects from the estate: a set of old keys, letters found among Thomas's possessions, and an assortment of personal effects whose significance only he seemed to grasp. Later, as I retired to my quarters, I found myself replaying the day's discoveries, my mind racing to keep pace with Holmes's rapid inferences. The mysterious visitor, the secretive staff, the ancient family curses, all wove a complex tapestry, a story still unfolding and laden with dangers hidden beneath layers of civility. Holmes, ever the enigma, remained the calm eye in the storm. Yet even he hinted at a deeper complexity to this case that had yet to reveal itself fully, for the game was far from over, and somewhere, hidden within the twisting corridors and shadowed histories of Ashcroft Manor, lay the answers. We sought answers that would challenge every assumption we held. Even about Holmes himself, the flickering candlelight cast long, restless shadows across the walls of the Ashcroft Library, where Holmes sat hunched over his notes, fingers tapping a restless rhythm on the surface of the desk. Outside, the November wind rattled the ancient window panes, as if urging us to hasten toward the truth. Yet, within this grand room, surrounded by musty volumes and whispered histories, the mystery only seemed to deepen. I had spent the day observing Holmes's methodical approach, his silence at times unsettling, his gaze distant as he contemplated layers of complexity that eluded my grasp. Tonight, at last, He appeared ready to share the fruits of his preliminary reasoning. Oh, he delivered it with the usual caution that had become a hallmark of our investigations. Lord Ashcroft's predicament, Holmes began, glancing up briefly with those piercing eyes, is entangled in both present danger and ancestral shadows. The threat embodied in the letter, the disappearance of Thomas, and the recent appearance of the silver locket all intertwine, but not yet in a straightforward fashion. He spread several documents on the desk, photographs of the letter, the ledger pages, and a map of the estate with careful notations. Allow me to outline my working hypothesis, though I caution you, Watson, it remains preliminary. It's preliminary. I nodded, eager yet apprehensive. Firstly, Holmes continued, Thomas's disappearance is unlikely to be a simple act of desertion or flight. The servant's devotion to the Ashcroft family and his careful records suggest he was burdened with knowledge dangerous enough to provoke his removal. Holmes's fingers traced the map, resting on the east wing. The visitor in the gray cloak, who arrived unannounced and was refused entry, may be connected to this knowledge. His presence near the east gate indicates a familiarity with the estate, but also a caution that suggests he does not wish to be seen. He looked up sharply. I believe Thomas was either coerced into silence or abducted. The signs at the east door, the scratch marks and crushed foliage support a hurried departure, not a planned escape. I furrowed my brow. But what of? The letter, its cryptic tone and unusual seal, what can we deduce from those? Holmes smiled thinly. The letter's seal, while unfamiliar to us, bears hallmarks of deliberate forgery intended to misdirect. The quality of the paper and ink, and the archaic phrasing, suggest an attempt to evoke dread tied to ancient family curses or secret societies. This may be the work of a person skilled in psychological manipulation, aiming to unsettle Lord Ashcroft and weaken the household's resolve. He folded his hands thoughtfully. Suspect the author has intimate knowledge of the family's history and current affairs, okay? And that the threat is as much about leverage as about violence. Leaning forward, Holmes tapped the silver locket lightly. The reappearance of this locket is no coincidence. Its prior loss in a minor theft years ago, and now its delivery near the scene of Thomas's disappearance, suggests a taunt or message. Whoever seeks to destabilize the Ashcrofts understands the emotional weight this item carries. I found myself piecing together the fragments as Holmes laid them bare, but I was also keenly aware of the gaps, the elusive motives, and the unseen players behind the scenes. Holmes resumed pacing, voice low but urgent. My current theory is that Thomas discovered something a secret or betrayal that threatened powerful interests. The shadow in the Rang visitor may be an agent of those interests, sent to retrieve or silence the valet. He paused, eyes darkening. However, this theory relies heavily on conjecture. We have yet to uncover the nature of this secret, the identities of those involved, or the full extent of the threat. What then is the next step? Holmes's gaze sharpened. We must probe deeper into the household, the staff, and the family's archives. More importantly, we must observe the reactions of those closest to Lord Ashcroft. Fear and guilt often manifest subtly in hesitation, in choice of words, in involuntary gestures. The room was silent for a moment before Holmes spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. Watson, what we face is a carefully woven web of deceit and intimidation. It may be that we have been shown only the surface. True danger often wears the mask of familiarity. Kay felt the weight of his words. Kay, sensing that this first theory might be a starting point rather than a conclusion. That evening, Holmes requested that I join him in interviewing the household staff individually, away from the prying eyes and ears of their peers. We began with Mary Ellis, the maid who had earlier spoken with such apprehension under Holmes's gentle but incisive questioning. She revealed little more than a deep-seated fear of watchers and vague references to whispered conversations overheard between certain servants. Next was the butler, Mr. Clive, whose stern demeanor did little to mask a growing impatience. When Holmes mentioned the gray-cloaked visitor, Clive's jaw tightened, and he briefly faltered before asserting that no such visitor had been seen by him personally. Yet, the cook insists otherwise. Holmes noted calmly. Clive shifted uneasily. I only know what I see and hear, Mr. Holmes. I cannot be held responsible for rumors. Holmes's eyes bore into Clive's, and yet a man's silence or evasion can be as telling as his words. As the interviews progressed, it became evident that the staff were fractured, some loyal to Lord Ashcroft, others perhaps aligned with forces unknown to us. Holmes's method was to listen for contradictions, for slips in tone or expression, and to note the unspoken fears that knit the household together. Later, in private, Holmes confessed to me, the servants guard their secrets closely. There is more to this household than the Ashcroft name suggests. It is a crucible of loyalties and betrayals. We also examined the ledger again, paying close attention to seemingly innocuous entries that Holmes suggested might serve as coded messages or warnings by nightfall. The manor had settled into an uneasy calm, but Holmes's mind was restless. He turned to me and said, Watson, the puzzle pieces are laid before us, but the picture remains incomplete. Our first theory explains much, but not all. There is a shadow, still unaccounted for, one we must expose before it moves again. I knew then that this case, like so many before it, would demand our full resolve and the sharpest powers of deduction. And so, with the weight of the Ashcroft legacy pressing down on us, we prepared to delve further into the secrets lurking behind those ancient walls. Chapter 03. The following morning. The mist still clung to the grounds of Ashcroft Manor, lending the estate an even more spectral air. Holmes and I had resolved to explore the areas beyond the immediate household, following the faintest threads of evidence that might have escaped initial notice. The previous day's inquiries had produced many leads, but none that revealed the heart of the mystery until, quite unexpectedly, a small, seemingly insignificant discovery changed everything. Our first task was to examine the gardens, particularly the eastern border where the visitor had been seen and where the latch of the garden door had been found ajar. The grounds were vast, stretching into dense woodland, and dotted with paths that twisted and forked beneath ancient oaks and elms. The chill in the air made our breath visible as we moved slowly, Holmes's keen eyes scanning every detail as we passed the hedgerows and flower beds. Holmes paused abruptly beside a patch of earth near a crumbling stone bench, its surface mottled with moss and lichen. Here, Watson, he said quietly, kneeling down. Serve the soil. It has been recently disturbed, though the lack of footprints suggests careful work. I bent closer, noting the faint impression of something small, perhaps a box or bundle buried just beneath the loose earth. Holmes produced a small trowel from his coat pocket and began to dig with delicate precision. After a few moments, he unearthed a small leather pouch, tied with a faded ribbon and coated in a thin layer of dirt and morning dew. Carefully, he opened the pouch, revealing its contents, a handful of old letters, yellowed with age and brittle. At the edges, in a small, folded scrap of paper with hastily scrawled writing. The letters bore no addresses or stamps, suggesting they had been hidden here deliberately. Holmes's eyes gleamed as he examined the documents. This, he said, softly, may well be the key we have sought. Up. We retreated to the library to examine the letters by lamplight. The handwriting was varied, some elegant and flowing, others jagged and hurried. Blue. The letters spanned several decades, chronicling disputes and betrayals within the Ashcroft family. One letter, in particular, caught Holmes's attention. It was unsigned, written in a cipher that defied immediate understanding, but hinted at a dangerous secret. The cipher is crude, but effective, Holmes murmured. It conceals names, dates, and places that do not correspond with the public record. I leaned over his shoulder, scanning the strange symbols. What sort of secret could require such concealment? Holmes was silent for a moment, his fingers tracing the coded lines. Secrets of inheritance, illegitimacy, or betrayal. These are common enough. But the tone here suggests something darker. The writer feared exposure enough to hide these details beneath layers of code and time. Then Holmes unfolded the small scrap of paper, which bore a brief, urgent message. Trust none. The eyes watch always. Beware the silver mark. The silver mark, Holmes repeated thoughtfully. This matches the engraving on the locket we found. Seems our unknown adversary uses symbols to unsettle and warn. Our exploration had uncovered a thread linking the family's shadowed past to the present turmoil. Yet Holmes said nothing of the cipher solution or his interpretation of the letter's deeper meaning. It was as if he wished to keep the revelation close, to shield it from premature disclosure until the moment was right. Later, Holmes invited me to accompany him on a discreet visit to a local antiquarian, known for his expertise in cryptography and family histories. The antiquarian's cluttered shop, nestled between narrow streets in a quieter quarter of the city, smelled of old paper and dusted treasure trove for a man like Holmes. The antiquarian, an elderly gentleman with keen eyes behind round spectacles, greeted us with polite curiosity. Holmes presented the letters and a cipher. After careful study, the expert confirmed Holmes's suspicion. The cipher was an archaic substitution code, once popular among clandestine societies and secret families. This is no mere puzzle, the antiquarian said gravely. It was designed to conceal information dangerous to those involved, meant only for eyes of the initiated. With the expert's aid, Holmes began to decode the message, revealing fragments of a family scandal, long-buried accusations of betrayal, involving a close relative who had mysteriously vanished and whose descendants might still wield influence under a veil of respectability. Returning to Ashcroft Manor, Holmes and I pondered the implications. Watson, he said, voice low and intense. These letters expose a network of secrets that go far beyond the current threats. They suggest that Thomas may have stumbled upon truths someone wished to bury forever. As if on cue, a soft knock interrupted our deliberations. Mary Alice, the maid, appeared in the doorway, her face pale but determined. Mr. Holmes, there is something you should see. She led us to a forgotten chamber beneath the manor, accessible through a narrow door, behind the library shelves. The room was small, dusty, and lined with old trunks and forgotten belongings. Among the clutter, Holmes's gaze fixed on a peculiar object, tarnished silver brooch. It's engraved with the same vine pattern as the locket and the cryptic silver mark. Holmes picked it up, studying it intently. This symbol recurs like a signature. Whoever orchestrates this turmoil is leaving a calling card, deliberately linking the past to the present. Mary hesitated before speaking again. There have been whispers among the staff talk of secret meetings and strange visitors in the dead of night. Thomas warned me once to be wary of the silver mark. I thought it was nonsense. Holmes's expression grew grave. Nonsense often carries a kernel of truth, Watson. We must now consider that this silver mark is the key to unraveling the entire mystery. Yet, even as Holmes pieced together these revelations, the true extent of the danger remained obscured. The more clues we uncovered, the more labyrinthine the web seemed, with invisible threads pulling us toward an unknown center. That night, as I wrote these observations by candlelight, Holmes remained deep in thought, pondering the letters, the cipher, and the silent warnings encoded in family heirlooms. His mind, as always, moved faster than I could follow. weaving patterns that eluded even my closest attention. And so the buried clue had emerged from the earth. Okay. In the past, a hidden fragment that promised to illuminate the darkness, but also warned of shadows still concealed. The game was far from over, and the stakes had never felt higher. The days that followed our unearthing of the letters and the silver ark brought no immediate clarity, only a deepening web of suspicion and uncertainty. Ashcroft Manor, already heavy with its ancient secrets, now felt suffused with an intangible menace, as though the walls themselves whispered warnings too faint for any but Holmes to hear. Our efforts to interrogate the household staff and sift through the estate's archives had yielded a perplexing tangle of half-truths and contradictions. Each revelation seemed to multiply the shadows rather than dispel them. Holmes, usually so unflappable, grew increasingly restless, pacing the length of the library with that singular intensity which always foretold a mind grappling with unseen forces. "Watson," he confided one evening, "we have stumbled into a labyrinth of false trails. The danger is not merely in what is hidden, but in what is deliberately concealed behind layers of misdirection." Our first suspect, the butler Clive, who had been evasive during our previous interview, became the focus of renewed scrutiny. Holmes sought to probe beneath the butler's carefully maintained composure, ranging to observe his actions discreetly. One afternoon, Holmes and I positioned ourselves in a small anteroom overlooking the main hall. Through a crack in the door, we watched Clive conduct his duties. To the casual eye, he was the epitome of professionalism, composed, courteous, and exacting. Yet Holmes's gaze caught the smallest tells, a brief tightening of the jaw, a furtive glance toward a hidden corner, and, most telling, the way his hand trembled ever so slightly when he thought himself unobserved. "Notice, Watson," Holmes whispered, "how the butler's calm is but a mask for inner turmoil. Such contradictions are the footprints of a guilty conscience, or at least of a man burdened by dangerous knowledge." Yet, when Holmes finally confronted Clive privately, the butler denied all accusations, attributing his behavior to the strain of recent events. "I have served this family faithfully for years, Mr. Holmes," he said with quiet dignity. "If you suspect me, then you must look elsewhere." While Clive's defiance was firm, Holmes remained unconvinced, but cautious. "Suspicion alone will not solve this case," he reminded me later. "We require evidence, tangible and unassailable." Attention then turned to the maid Mary Ellis. Despite her initial openness, she became increasingly reticent under questioning, and rumors swirled among the staff about her frequent, secretive visits to the servants' quarters late at night. Holmes shadowed her discreetly one evening and observed a brief meeting with an unidentified figure cloaked in shadow. The encounter was short and silent, but enough to deepen the mystery. Who was this visitor, and what messages were exchanged in hushed tones beneath the cloak of darkness? Holmes noted carefully, "Watson, human nature is the greatest riddle of all. Trust is a currency often spent too freely or hoarded too jealously." Meanwhile, the ciphered letters from the leather pouch remained only partially decoded, revealing tantalizing fragments, but no full picture. Holmes spent hours poring over the cryptic script, his brow furrowed in concentration. At times, he would mutter, under his breath, cross-referencing family trees and old newspapers, seeking patterns invisible to any other. One particular afternoon, we were interrupted by the arrival of a telegram bearing urgent news. A distant cousin, Sir Edmund Ashcroft, had unexpectedly returned to the estate after years abroad. The family's reception was mixed, tinged with unease and veiled hostility. Sir Edmund was a man of imposing stature, his presence commanding attention despite his aged frame. His eyes, sharp and assessing, missed little an observer with secrets of his own. Holmes greeted him cordially, but with a note of wariness. "Sir Edmund, your return is most sudden. Pray, what brings you to Ashcroft Manor at this critical juncture?" Sir Edmund's reply was measured. "Family matters, Mr. Holmes. There are loose ends to tie, debts to settle, and truths that must finally see the light." Though outwardly cooperative, Sir Edmund's demeanor hinted at concealed motives. He took a keen interest in our investigation, often probing Holmes with questions designed to gauge his knowledge and intentions. As days passed, Holmes's focus shifted among these emerging figures, each presenting a plausible thread to follow, but ultimately revealing themselves to be red herrings. The butler's nervousness stemmed from long-held resentments. Mary's clandestine meetings involved protecting a younger sibling rather than conspiring. And Sir Edmund's enigmatic remarks masked old family grievances rather than criminal designs. Holmes shared his frustration with me one evening by the fire. "Every avenue we explore seems to circle back upon itself, Watson. The true architect of these machinations is a master of disguise, hiding behind the facades of loyalty and family." I confessed my growing unease. "Is there no sign to guide us through this maze?" Holmes's eyes gleamed with a familiar intensity. "There is always a sign, Watson, but it is often the smallest, most overlooked detail, a flicker in a glance, the hesitation before a word, the scent on a sleeve. Our task is to train ourselves to see what others dismiss." Our nights grew longer, filled with restless vigils and quiet discussions. Each revelation brought new questions. Each dead end deepened the suspense. The atmosphere within Ashcroft Manor grew thick with suspicion, tension, and unspoken fear. One particularly chilling evening, a sudden scream shattered the stillness. We rushed to the servants' quarters to find Mary Ellis collapsed, pale and trembling, claiming she had seen a ghostly figure near the east gate, a shadowy man in a gray cloak, the very apparition Thomas had feared. Holmes examined her carefully, noting the signs of genuine terror mixed with the possibility of manipulation. "Fear is a potent tool, Watson," he mused, "and in the hands of a skilled actor, it can be wielded to fracture trust and obscure truth." As the manor settled once more, we all sensed that the stakes were rising. The false trails had led to dead ends, but the real threat, the puppet master behind the scenes, was tightening the noose. Holmes's parting words that night were heavy with foreboding. "We must prepare ourselves, Watson. Soon the shadows will move, and the game will enter its most dangerous phase." And with that, the true mystery of Ashcroft's Manor deepened, beckoning us onward into its darkest recesses. Chapter 04. The atmosphere within Ashcroft's Manor had become taut with unease, as though every shadow whispered a warning and every footstep might conceal a threat. The false trails of recent days had left us grasping for solid ground, and Holmes knew that to unravel this web of deceit, he must shift from observation to action. It was time to set a trap, one calculated with the precision of a master strategist, and designed to draw the unseen adversary from their hiding place. Holmes called me to his side early one morning, his eyes alight with that rare combination of resolve and anticipation. "Watson, our adversary is clever, but not infallible. They operate from the shadows, seeking to manipulate and intimidate. Yet every predator leaves a trace when baited correctly." He paused, tapping a finger against a map of the estate laid across the library table. "We must create an illusion of ignorance, of vulnerability. Only then will the true player reveal themselves." Our plan was twofold. First, Holmes would feign ignorance of the deciphered letters and the significance of the silver mark, allowing rumors to circulate within the household that we were at a loss. Second, we would stage the appearance of a new message, one that would challenge and provoke the mysterious figure behind the threats. Holmes tasked Mary Ellis with discreetly planting the forged letter near the east gate, a move that would not go unnoticed by any lurking eyes. Preparations took the better part of the day. Holmes carefully crafted the letter, using the same archaic Phrasing in the signature silver mark too lent it an air of authenticity. Hi. We rehearsed our roles, me as the loyal but puzzled doctor, Holmes as the ostensibly baffled detective, both playing our parts for the benefit of any unseen observers. As twilight settled, a thick fog rolled in from the nearby woods, shrouding the manor in a damp embrace. The stage was set. Holmes stationed himself in the library, a room with windows overlooking the east wing and its adjoining garden. I took my place nearby, prepared to assist or intervene as necessary. The household staff had been subtly alerted. To act naturally, their curiosity piqued, but their fears unspoken. Hours passed in near silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of the fireplace and the distant tolling of the estate's ancient clock. Holmes and I exchanged few words, our senses attuned to every creak and whisper. Suddenly, shadow detached itself from the fog beyond the garden gate. The figure moved cautiously, pausing near the spot where Mary had placed the forged letter. Holmes's eyes narrowed, and he gestured for silence. The figure bent, retrieving the letter with care. Moments later, the shadow turned and disappeared into the mist, leaving no trace but the lingering sense of intent. "Excellent," Holmes whispered. "Our quarry is watching, and they have taken the bait." The following day was a study in tension. Holmes meticulously analyzed the timing of the figure's appearance, cross-referencing it with the household's movements and the subtle clues gathered from our surveillance. The identity of the visitor remained concealed, but their patterns of behavior hinted at someone intimately familiar with the estate's routines. Our patience was rewarded when Holmes noted a sudden shift in the household dynamics. The staff grew increasingly nervous, their whispered conversations halting abruptly at our approach. Clive, the butler, who had previously displayed a stern demeanor, appeared more distracted, his eyes darting toward the east wing with uncharacteristic anxiety. Holmes arranged for a discreet confrontation with the household, under the guise of searching for further clues. One by one, the staff were questioned, their reactions closely observed for signs of deception or relief. Mary Ellis, who had aided our plan with admirable courage, displayed an uncharacteristic hesitation when asked about the forged letter's discovery. Holmes's gaze fixed upon her, sharp and probing. "Miss Ellis," Holmes said quietly, "your loyalty is commendable, but you must understand the gravity of this matter. Any concealment may imperil not only this investigation, but all who dwell here." Mary's eyes flickered with emotion before she spoke. "I only wish to protect those I care for, Mr. Holmes." Holmes inclined his head, then turned to me. "Watson, human hearts often harbor conflicting loyalties. It is this tangled web we must unravel." In the days that followed, the trap began to close. Holmes observed the subtle signs of mounting pressure-furtive glances exchanged in corridors, the sudden absence of certain staff members at crucial moments, and an elusive tension that hung thickly in the air. Then came the night that broke the silence. A sharp noise echoed from the east wing, a clash, a hurried step, and a muffled curse. Holmes and I sprang from our seats, racing toward the sound. In a dimly lit corridor, we found Clive, the butler, cornered and visibly shaken. In his hand, a small, glinting object, an ornate silver pen, engraved with the unmistakable vine pattern of the silver mark. "Caught at last," Holmes said calmly. "This pen is the signature of our adversary." Clive's face paled. "I only took it to protect myself. I swear I have no part in this madness." Holmes regarded him silently for a moment before speaking. "Your fear has led you astray, Clive, but the truth will soon be revealed." As dawn broke over Ashcroft Manor, the trap had succeeded in flushing out a player hiding in plain sight. Yet Holmes warned me, this is but a beginning. The true mastermind remains concealed, and their game is far from over. The manor settled once more into an uneasy quiet, but I knew we were closing in on the heart of the mystery. The pieces were moving, the shadows stirring, and soon the final act would unfold. The events of the preceding night had left Ashcroft Manor trembling on the edge of revelation, as though the very walls held their breath, awaiting the moment when the truth might at last burst forth from shadow. Clive's discovery with the silver-marked pen had thrust the investigation into a new phase, one where concealment was no longer sustainable, and the hunted might soon become the hunted. Holmes and I convened early in the library, the scent of burning wood mingling with the ever-present fog drifting through the slightly cracked windows. Holmes's gaze was sharp, his mind clearly racing through possibilities, yet unspoken. "We have unearthed a player, Watson," he said quietly, but the game's conclusion remains distant. "Our adversary is cunning, skilled in deception, and evidently prepared to sacrifice pawns to protect the king." The servants' quarters were restless that morning, whispers growing louder, and eyes avoiding contact. Mary Ellis, brave though she was, wore the pallor of someone burdened by heavy knowledge. The household seemed poised on a knife's edge, and I felt the weight of the unsaid pressing in around us. Holmes requested a private meeting with the family, an assembly called under the pretense of addressing the recent disturbances. The great hall, with its towering beams and flickering candelabras, felt colder than usual, the air thick with tension. Lord Ashcroft, his face lined with the fatigue of long worry, sat beside his stern wife. Their son, Edward, stood aloof, his jaw set and eyes sharp with suspicion. Even Sir Edmund was present, his expression unreadable, but every bit as guarded. Holmes began with his usual measured tone. "My lords and ladies, we find ourselves entangled in a web spun long before any of us arrived at this estate. Yet the strands are now taut, and the slightest movement may snap the delicate balance of secrecy." He paced slowly, eyes sweeping the assembly. "We have uncovered evidence of long-hidden betrayals, encoded warnings, and a figure operating behind the veil of loyalty. The silver mark is their signature, a calligraphy of fear and warning alike." As Holmes spoke, the tension in the room seemed to thicken. I noted the subtle changes, a tightening of Lord Ashcroft's grip on his chair, a flicker of unease in Lady Ashcroft's eyes, and a slight narrowing of Edward's gaze. Holmes continued, "It is time for the truth to emerge. To that end, I ask all present to consider carefully what they know or suspect, and to speak with candor. The safety of this household depends upon it." There was a long silence, broken only by the distant ticking of an ancient clock. Then Edward Ashcroft rose abruptly, his voice sharp and accusatory. "Enough riddles, Mr. Holmes. We are all aware of the whispers, but no proof has been presented to implicate anyone among us. Is this to be an inquisition or a search for justice?" Holmes met his gaze evenly. "Justice, Mr. Ashcroft. Justice tempered by reason and compassion." Edward's expression hardened. "Then present your proof." Holmes nodded and turned. "To me, Watson, if you please." I stepped forward, producing the silver pen we had found clutched in Clive's trembling hand. This object, bearing the silver mark, was discovered recently in the possession of the butler, Mr. Clive. It is a symbol that has appeared throughout our investigation in letters, heirlooms, and now in this very room. Murmur rippled through the assembled group. Lady Ashcroft's hand flew to her mouth, and even Sir Edmund's stoic mask seemed to falter. Holmes pressed on. "Mr. Clive's possession of this pen suggests he is more involved than he admits. However, suspicion must not replace evidence. I will now present the sequence of deductions leading us here." Holmes outlined the chain of events from the discovery of the ciphered letters buried in the garden, through the strange visitor in the gray cloak, to the conflicting accounts given by the servants. His voice held the room captive, weaving the disparate threads into a coherent tapestry. As Holmes concluded, he turned his gaze back to Clive, who now stood pale and trembling. "Mr. Clive, the moment has come to speak plainly. Were you acting alone, or on behalf of another?" Clive's lips quivered, and, for a tense heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Clive spoke. "I am but a servant. Yes, but not without my loyalties. I sought to protect this family from harm, from truths too dangerous to face." Holmes's eyes sharpened. "What truths, Mr. Clive? What interest did you serve?" Clive hesitated, glancing furtively around the room. "There are forces within this house, darker than any curse or scandal. Secrets that would unravel the Ashcroft name and destroy all who bear it. I was instructed, commanded, to silence any who threatened to expose these shadows." A gasp escaped Lady Ashcroft, and Lord Ashcroft's face darkened with a mixture of anger and sorrow. Holmes pressed, "Who commanded you? Speak now, for withholding such knowledge only deepens the wound." Clive looked toward Sir Edmund, then away, the conflict visible on his face. It was said that some matters must remain buried, that the price of truth is too high. Sir Edmund's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Holmes's gaze turned to Edward. "And you, Mr. Ashcroft, what have you to say of these buried matters?" Edward's eyes blazed. "This family has been haunted by past sins and betrayals, but I will not stand by while outsiders pick apart our history. If there are those who seek to harm us, I shall face them openly." Holmes inclined his head. "Croft, yet bravery without wisdom can be reckless." The room seemed suspended between confrontation and confession, each participant weighed down by secrets and fear. Then Holmes revealed the final card, the decrypted cipher. He laid the translated text before them. Allegations of illegitimacy, forged documents, and a conspiracy reaching back generations to secure fortune and power through deception. The assembled faces paled as the implications sank in. Holmes looked around slowly. The man in the gray cloak was no stranger, but a messenger, a warning from those who seek to preserve this facade. Suddenly, Mary Ellis stepped forward, voice steady despite the turmoil. "I know who this messenger is. Saw him once, long ago, before Thomas disappeared. He was no stranger to the house, but a shadow of a man bound by fear and duty." Holmes's eyes fixed on her. "Speak freely, Miss Ellis. Your courage is commendable." Mary nodded, then spoke clearly. "The visitor was Sir Edmund, agent a man sent to silence Thomas and guard the family's darkest secrets." Gasps and denials erupted, but Holmes raised a hand for silence. "The truth is never simple," he said softly. "But now, with these revelations, the path is clear. Those who seek to hide behind shadows will be brought into the light." As the family grappled with the weight of confession and accusation, Holmes turned to me, his expression unreadable. "This, Watson, is but the prelude to justice. The final reckoning approaches, and with it, the chance to restore truth to Ashcroft Manor." Chapter 05. The morning sun filtered weakly through the heavy curtains of Ashcroft Manor, casting long, wavering beams across the great hall where the family and staff gathered once more. The previous night's revelations had left a palpable silence hanging over the estate, a silence heavy with the weight of truths finally brought into the open, yet still fraught with uncertainty about what the future might hold. Holmes stood near the hearth, his usual sharp gaze softened by a rare expression of contemplation. I could see in his eyes the burden of justice's complexities, the understanding that truth was rarely the end of a story but merely a new beginning. Lord Ashcroft was the first to break the silence. Gaze, though still thick with emotion, carried a newfound resolve. "This family has long borne the scars of secrets and betrayals. Now, We must face them honestly if we are to heal and move forward. Move forward. Lady Ashcroft nodded slowly, her eyes moist but determined. The shadows that have haunted us cannot dictate our fate any longer. We owe it to ourselves and to Thomas's memory to confront whatever darkness remains. Holmes stepped forward, his tone calm and authoritative. The uncovering of hidden machinations, the coded warnings, and the silenced voices has brought us closer to understanding the true nature of the threat. But justice, as I have often said, is not merely the exposure of guilt. It is the restoration of balance and the protection of the innocent. He turned to the assembled staff. Cooperation has been invaluable. In time, more will be revealed, and those responsible for wrongdoing will be held accountable. But for now, I urge calm and trust in the process. As the gathering dispersed, I lingered beside Holmes, sensing that despite the outward resolution, his mind was still working through the intricate puzzles we had encountered. Holmes, I ventured quietly, do you believe we have seen the end of this matter? He regarded me with a thoughtful gaze. The surface has been broken, Watson, but beneath lie currents that run deeper still. The truth is often a fractal, revealing new patterns with every layer uncovered. Our days at Ashcroft Manor became marked by careful restoration of order, yet the air remained thick with unease. Investigations into the ciphered letters and the family archives continued, revealing further complexities. Legal counsel was engaged, and local authorities informed discreetly, their interest tempered by the delicate nature of the Ashcroft name and its social standing. Holmes made it clear that the final unraveling would require time and prudence. Patience is the ally of reason, he reminded me on several occasions. Rushing to judgment risks obscuring rather than illuminating the truth. Throughout this period, I observed changes in the household. The servants, once furtive and anxious, gradually resumed their duties with a tentative normalcy. Mary Ellis, in particular, seemed steadier, her courage bolstered by our acknowledgement of her honesty and assistance. Yet, even amid this fragile peace, small signs hinted that all was not yet settled. Whispered conversations ceased abruptly. At our approach, letters arrived marked with unfamiliar seals, and shadows seemed to linger longer in the manor's ancient corridors. One evening, as Holmes and I reviewed the latest cipher translations in the library, a visitor arrived. Inspector Lestrade, summoned by Holmes to discuss matters arising from the investigation. Lestrade, a man of practical sensibility and straightforward methods, carried an air of cautious respect tempered with skepticism. Holmes, he greeted briskly. This Ashcroft affair has your mark all over it, intricate, labyrinthine, and shadowed by old family grudges. Holmes smiled faintly. Indeed, Lestrade. The surface may glisten with falsehoods, but beneath lies the marrow of truth. It is a matter of peeling back each layer with care. Lestrade frowned. And what do you make of the cipher and the silver mark? Superstition or substance? Holmes's eyes gleamed. Symbols are powerful tools, not only for communication, but for manipulation. The silver mark is a signature of fear, used to control and silence. It is substance, cloaked in superstition. Lestrade nodded slowly. I'll leave the decoding to you then. But be warned, some truths are best handled delicately, especially when they touch on those with power and influence. As Lestrade departed, Holmes resumed his study with renewed vigor. We tread a fine line, Watson. The intersection of justice and social order is fraught with peril. The weeks that followed saw progress in the investigation's quieter aspects. Holmes's deductions helped piece together the long-forgotten family scandal hinted at in the cipher. Allegations of forged wills, hidden heirs, and clandestine alliances emerged from dusty records and whispered testimonies. The Ashcroft family faced these revelations with a mixture of shame and determination. Lord Ashcroft announced plans to commission an independent inquiry, emphasizing transparency and accountability. Lady Ashcroft resolved to restore the estate's honor through charitable works and renewed engagement with the community. For my part, I documented the unfolding events with the care of a chronicler, aware that history was being rewritten in these halls not with ink and quill alone, but with the hard-won truths brought to light by Holmes's unparalleled insight. Throughout it all, Holmes remained the ever-watchful guardian of balance, wary of haste and ever mindful of the human frailties entwined with justice. One late afternoon, as we strolled through the manor's grounds, I ventured to ask, "Holmes, after all we have uncovered, what is your final impression of the case?" He paused, glancing toward the distant horizon where the sun cast a golden haze over the fields. That even the brightest intellects cannot always see the full measure of human folly and fear. Secrets, once buried, tend to fester, but so too does the capacity for redemption. Our task is to bring clarity where confusion reigns, and to remind those who wield power that justice is a living thing, delicate, demanding, and ultimately inevitable. As the shadows lengthened and the evening chill crept in, I felt a profound respect for the man beside me's mind, a labyrinth in itself, forever chasing the elusive dance of truth amid darkness. The case of Ashcroft Manor was nearing its close, but its lessons lingered, a testament to the complexities hidden within the human heart, the frailty of trust, and the enduring pursuit of justice. With the first tendrils of dawn brushing softly against the ancient stone of Ashcroft's Manor, I found myself once more in the familiar confines of our London lodgings on Baker Street. The case, now passed into the annals of memory, lingered in my thoughts with a persistence matched only by the faintest echo of fog against the window panes. Holmes sat across from me, here, his figure poised with that habitual stillness that seemed both a mask and a signpost to his restless mind. He regarded the flickering candlelight, fingers steepled beneath his chin, before finally speaking in his customary deliberate tone. "Watson, the human mind is a labyrinth far more intricate than any cipher or code we encountered at Ashcroft Manor. We were but cartographers tracing its contours, illuminating corners of fear, ambition, and loyalty." I nodded, mindful of how our work together had once again underscored the delicate balance between illumination and shadow. Silvermark, I ventured, was as much a symbol of dread as it was of identity, like a brand forged by generations of silence and secrecy. Holmes inclined his head thoughtfully. "Indeed, symbols are vessels of power. They evoke fear, allegiance, or defiance, depending on the hand that wields them. It is the psychology behind these emblems that fascinates me, the way they shape actions and destinies." For a moment, silence enveloped the room, save for the occasional crackle from the fireplace. Then Holmes smiled a rare, almost enigmatic expression. "Cases such as this remind us that truth is not always a beacon of clarity, but often a flickering candle in the vast darkness of human nature. We seek patterns, resolutions, a neat unraveling, yet life rarely complies." I could not help but reflect on the many false trails, the tangled loyalties, and the weighty confessions that marked our time at Ashcroft Manor. The greatest mysteries often lie not in the acts themselves, but in the motives buried beneath layers of pride, fear, and love. "Do you believe," I asked quietly, "that justice was truly served here?" Holmes's gaze sharpened. "Justice, my dear Watson, is an ideal one we strive for but seldom achieve in its purest form. What we bring forth is order from chaos, a measure of peace where discord reigned. The rest must be left to time and conscience." He rose, walking to the window where the London streets began to stir with the morning bustle. The Ashcrofts faced a future, uncertain but cleansed of at least some shadows. Whether they walk into the light or retreat again into darkness is their choice. Turning back to me, Holmes's voice carried a hint of dry wit. As for the silver mark, I suspect it will continue to haunt their memories like a specter. It's an emblem not only of past sins, but also of the power secrets wield long after they are uncovered. I smiled wryly, fitting legacy, and a reminder for us all that even the most brilliant intellects cannot unravel every human enigma. Holmes chuckled softly. Quite right, Watson. And so our work continues, piecing together clues, reading the subtle shifts in posture and speech, deciphering the human code far more complex than any cipher. As I closed my notebook, the familiar rhythm of our partnerships settled around us as shared understanding that while cases may end, the pursuit of truth is eternal. Before I retired, Holmes offered a final musing, one that lingered in my mind long after the candle had burned low. In every shadow cast by man's deeds, there lies a secret waiting patiently to be revealed. Our task is to find it, not with haste or hubris, but with patience, empathy, and unyielding reason. I raised my glass to him silently, grateful for the wisdom that guided us through the darkest mysteries. Thus concluded the affair of Ashcroft Manor, one of Holmes's best-kept secrets, hidden not in the shadows of London's alleys, but within the hearts of those bound by blood, duty, and the fragile human condition. The case of Ashcroft's Manor had settled into a fragile quiet. A lingering restlessness clung to both Holmes and me like the evening fog that wove through the London streets, insistent, elusive, and full of unspoken secrets. Though we had revealed the core of the mystery, Holmes's gaze remained distant, as if awaiting a revelation yet to come. One damp morning, while the gas lamps still flickered in the half-light of Baker Street, a new visitor arrived at our door. The man introduced himself as Mr. Tobias Fairchild, a solicitor representing a minor branch of the Ashcroft family residing far from London. His appearance was unremarkable. At first glance, modest attire, steady hands, and eyes that held a careful WATCHFULNESS. Yet Holmes's scrutiny was immediate and exacting. He observed Tobias's mannerisms, the brief flicker of impatience when asked about his purpose, the subtle tightening of his lips when the Ashcroft name was mentioned, and a faint scar tracing across his left knuckle. "Mr. Fairchild," Holmes said, his voice measured, "you come at a curious hour. Pray, what business brings you to our modest lodgings?" Fairchild's answer was cautious. "Mr. Holmes, I have come because of recent events at Ashcroft Manor. Though my branch of the family lives apart, I share a vested interest in the estate's affairs. There are documents and concerns matters best handled discreetly that I believe you should be aware of." Holmes's eyes narrowed with interest. "Discretion is my watchword, Mr. Fairchild. Pray continue." The solicitor produced a small, worn leather satchel. From it, he carefully withdrew a bundle of papers and a small wooden box, aged and varnished with care. "These," Fairchild explained, "are correspondences and artifacts uncovered in an old family trust deed discovered in a neglected vault beneath my ancestral home. They seem connected to the matters we have previously discussed, the coded letters, a silver mark, and a certain unnamed figure whose shadow has loomed over the Ashcroft lineage." Holmes examined the documents with intense focus, his fingers tracing the faded ink and cryptic seals. "Fascinating," he murmured. "These writings add a new dimension to the puzzle. One stretches beyond the walls of Ashcroft Manor and into a darker chapter of family history." Fairchild revealed that the documents referenced an ancient pact, a series of secret agreements forged in desperation and greed, designed to consolidate wealth and influence at great cost to truth and loyalty. The silver mark, he suggested, was not merely a warning, but a symbol of that pact passed down through generations as a grim reminder and instrument of control. As Holmes absorbed this new information, he could see the familiar spark rekindling in his eyes. The case was far from over. This was not merely a family dispute or a series of personal betrayals. It was a legacy of shadows woven deep into the fabric of their history. Holmes looked up. Mr. Fairchild, this revelation compels us to reconsider all prior deductions. The layers of deception run deeper and reach farther than we imagined. It is imperative we investigate these new leads thoroughly. Fairchild nodded gravely. I feared as much, but with such revelations come dangers. There are those who would prefer these secrets to remain buried. Holmes's smile was thin, edged with steel. Danger is the spice of the detective's life, Mr. Fairchild. It will not deter us. In the days that followed, Holmes and I pored over the documents, cross-referencing names, dates, and cryptic phrases. We traced the lineage of the pacts, architects, and the descendants, still bound by its terms. The silver mark emerged as a sinister emblem of allegiance and threat used to silence dissenters and protect a fragile but toxic balance of power. Our investigation led us beyond London's fog-shrouded streets to a secluded country estate tied to the Fairchild family. There, in an ancient library, we uncovered further correspondence and personal diaries chronicling the fractures within the family, hinting at past betrayals and concealed motives. Yet, with every discovery, the complexity of the case deepened. The lines between victim and perpetrator blurred, and motives became as tangled as the twisting ivy clinging to the estate's crumbling walls. Holmes, usually so assured, at times displayed a rare moment of uncertainty. Watson, this case reminds me that human nature defies simple categorization. Truth and falsehood are often interwoven with threads of hope, fear, and regret. I shared his sentiments. Then the silver mark, is it merely a symbol or something more? Holmes considered. It is both a badge of power and a brand of fear. Symbols can shape realities far more effectively than actions alone. Our return to London was marked by a new resolve. Holmes prepared a plan to confront the remaining shadows threatening the Ashcroft legacy. The trap we had set before was but a prelude. The true challenge lay ahead. As we sat by the fire in our Baker Street sitting room, Holmes turned to me with a quiet intensity. Watson, the echoes of this mystery will soon demand a final reckoning. We must be ready to face not only the machinations of men, but the ghosts of their past. The fog pressed once more against the window panes, as if in answer. The arrival of Mr. Tobias Fairchild's revelations had cast new shadows over the Ashcroft saga, adding layers of complexity that only Holmes's keen mind could begin to unravel. Yet, with every new fragment uncovered, the mystery deepened, the stakes grew higher, and the line between ally and adversary blurred further. Holmes wasted no time. Within days, he dispatched letters to trusted contacts, arranged discreet inquiries, and prepared for an expedition to Fairchild's ancestral estate. I accompanied him, cued to witness how his legendary faculties would grapple with the tangled web extending beyond the fog-laden streets of London. The journey to the countryside was through winding roads bordered by dense woodlands, where the air was crisp and the sky held a pale, uncertain light. Fairchild's estate was an imposing relic of a bygone era, stone walls veined with ivy, towering oak doors, and windows darkened by age and shadow. We were received with a cautious hospitality. Servants moved silently, as if aware of the weighty matters shadowing our visit. Fairchild himself appeared changed, the gravity of the family's secrets etched in the furrows of his brow inside the grand library, surrounded by rows of leather-bound tomes and dust-choked relics. Holmes and I pored over the new documents' writings in cramped handwriting, its faded inked diagrams and cryptic marginalia, hinting at forbidden pacts and ancestral betrayals. Holmes's sharp eyes caught the tiniest detail, a nearly imperceptible watermark on one of the parchments, a symbol of an obscure secret society historically tied to clandestine power and influence. Watson, he murmured. This watermark revealed a connection we had not anticipated. The Ashcroft family's troubles are entangled not only in bloodlines, but in secret affiliations that reach into the highest echelons of society. I found myself both fascinated and unsettled. The deeper we delved, the more the case transcended a mere family dispute, venturing into realms of shadowy cabals and whispered conspiracies. As we traced the threads, a name emerged repeatedly: Lord Malvern, a once powerful nobleman who had vanished from public view decades earlier, but whose influence reportedly lingered like a ghost. Fairchild revealed that some of the documents hinted at Malvern's role in orchestrating the pact that bore the silver marker, legacy intended to bind families and secure power at all costs. Holmes leaned back, eyes glinting with that rare fire that presaged revelation. Lord Malvern may be the key to untangling this web. If he still wields influence, we must seek him out wherever he hides. Our inquiries soon took us to the underbelly of London, two shadowed alleys and forgotten clubs frequented by those who traded in secrets. Holmes's network of informants, long cultivated and fiercely loyal, proved invaluable. One evening, a coded message arrived, delivered by a courier cloaked in the fog, an invitation to a clandestine gathering at an old chapel on the outskirts of the city, a place whispered about among London's secret societies. Holmes regarded the note with a measured gaze. A summons to the heart of darkness, Watson. We must tread carefully. The night of the gathering was cold and draped in mist. Holmes and I approached the chapel under the cover of darkness, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of leaves. The building, abandoned and nearly reclaimed by nature, held in eerie stillness. Inside, faint candlelight flickered, revealing figures cloaked in shadows, faces obscured by hoods. The air was heavy with whispered incantations and the scent of aged wood and smoke. From the shadows, a figure emerged, a man whose bearing was at once commanding and inscrutable. Holmes's eyes locked on him, a flicker of recognition in their depths. Lord Malvern, Holmes said quietly, or a shade bearing his name. The man's voice was low and deliberate. Detective Holmes, your reputation precedes you. What brings you to a gathering from which few depart unscathed? Holmes answered without hesitation. The pursuit of truth and justice, no matter the cost. The encounter was a dance of words and veiled threats, an exchange where meaning was hidden beneath layers of rhetoric. Holmes pressed for answers regarding the pact, the silver mark, and the legacy of secrecy that had ensnared Ashcroft's manor. Malvern's smile was a blade veiled in silk. Secrets bind us all, Mr. Holmes. Some are shields, others are shackles. To break them is to risk everything. Holmes's response was steady. Yet some shackles must be broken for freedom to breathe. As the meeting ended, the figure of Malvern dissolved back into the shadows, leaving Holmes and me with more questions than answers, but with a clearer sense of the forces arrayed against us. Returning to Baker Street, I noted Holmes's contemplative silence. Watson, we are no longer chasing mere criminals, but confronting a legacy of power and fear, added quietly, and that legacy will test the very limits of our resolve and ingenuity. The Ashcroft mystery had grown into something far greater than either of us had imagined, an intricate dance of shadows, symbols, and secrets stretching back through generations, with no clear end in sight. As the city awoke beneath the pale dawn, I realized that our greatest challenge lay ahead, and that even Holmes's brilliance might be strained against the labyrinthine darkness we faced. The encounter with the elusive Lord Malvern had left Holmes contemplative and unusually guarded. The shadows that had long haunted the Ashcroft family now stretched out over the very heart of London itself, weaving a dangerous web in which we had become entangled. Yet Holmes's resolve never wavered. If anything, mysteries, increased complexity, only served to sharpen his focus. Days after our visit to the secretive chapel, palpable tension settled over Baker Street. The fog outside our window seemed thicker, heavier, pressing inward, as if the city itself whispered warnings. Holmes and I found our usual routines interrupted by subtle disturbances, expected visitors. Fleeting shadows glimpsed at the edge of vision, and cryptic messages slipped beneath our door. One evening, as I returned from a late walk, I found Holmes deep in concentration, examining a series of telegrams laid out on the table. His brow was furrowed, lips pressed in a thin line. "Watson," he said, without looking up, "we have attracted attention. Our pursuit of the Ashcroft secrets has ruffled feathers higher than we anticipated." I stepped closer, noting the telegrams. Bore signatures from various informants, some loyal, others hesitant. The messages spoke of strange occurrences, stolen letters, cryptic warnings sent to those who dared probe the family's past, and rumors of a clandestine society protecting ancient secrets. Holmes's voice grew grave. "It is clear that our adversaries are both well organized and ruthless. We must tread with care, lest we become pawns in a game far larger than ourselves." Later that night, a knock echoed softly at our door. Holmes opened it to reveal a slender figure, young woman cloaked in a dark shawl, her eyes wide but resolute. "Hi, am Eleanor Sinclair," she said quietly, "and I believe I can aid your investigation." Holmes gestured for her to enter, his curiosity immediately piqued. Eleanor explained she was a historian specializing in secret societies and had uncovered references to the Silver Mark and the two Ashcroft packed in obscure archives. "I have long suspected," she said, "that the Ashcroft mystery is but a fragment of a greater tapestry involving the most powerful families in England. The Silver Mark is a symbol recognized in several clandestine circles." Holmes listened intently, exchanging rapid questions and answers. Lana's knowledge was precise, and her presence seemed to bring a new dimension to the investigation. Over the following days, she worked closely with Holmes and me, providing access to rare manuscripts and decoding cryptic passages that aligned with the Ashcroft documents. Her insights illuminated connections between the pact, secret alliances, and a hidden agenda to control political and economic power. Yet, Eleanor also warned of the dangers inherent in uncovering such truths. Those who protect these secrets will go to great lengths to ensure they remain hidden. Trust is scarce and deception rampant. Holmes nodded. "Indeed, Miss Sinclair's trust must be earned carefully and vigilance maintained constantly." As we delved deeper, the trio Holmes, Eleanor, and myself became a tight-knit unit, each contributing a vital piece to the puzzle. But with every revelation came new threats. Our rooms were searched in our absence. Shadowy figure was spotted watching the building, and a cryptic note was found warning us to desist or suffer consequences. Holmes, ever unshaken, responded by redoubling our efforts. Key devised countermeasures, changing meeting places, encrypting our correspondence, and employing loyal informants to keep watch. One fog-laden evening, Holmes and I accompanied Eleanor to a hidden archive beneath the British Museum. There, amidst ancient scrolls and dusty tomes, we uncovered a ledger detailing the original signatories of the Ashcroft Pact names that included politicians, bankers, and nobles, many still influential today. The ledger bore the Silver Mark, linking the symbol to a network of power extending across generations. It was a chilling confirmation of the scale and reach of the conspiracy we faced. Returning to Baker Street, Holmes appeared both invigorated and burdened. "Watson, Eleanor, we stand at a crossroads. The forces arrayed against us are formidable, but knowledge is our greatest weapon." As the night deepened, I reflected on the delicate balance we now navigated, the web of loyalty and betrayal, secrets and threats, all woven into the fabric of England's elite. Despite the dangers, I remained steadfast in my admiration for Holmes's brilliance and determination. Yet, I could not shake the lingering question: in this intricate game of shadows, who could we truly trust? The events at the British Museum had intensified the gravity of our pursuit. Yet, the enigma surrounding the Ashcroft Pact and the silver mark only seemed to thicken. Holmes, Eleanor Sinclair, and I now found ourselves not merely chronicling a family's dark history, but confronting a web of influence and secrecy that stretched its tendrils through the corridors of power. Our growing alliance was tested not only by the dangers that lurked in the shadows, but also by the subtle, fractures of trust among us. Eleanor's presence was a boon, yet the depth of her knowledge and her motivations occasionally gave me pause. Holmes, ever the judge of character, maintained his customary caution, allowing no room for complacency. One late afternoon, as a dreary London rain tapped against the windows of Baker Street, a letter arrived bearing no signature but stamped with the unmistakable silver mark. The contents were brief, cryptic, and chilling. Some truths are meant to sleep beneath the stones. Cease your inquiries, or the past shall swallow the present. Holmes read the note with his usual impassivity, yet I detected a flicker of grim resolve. A warning from those who wield power through fear. We must proceed with increased vigilance. Watson, the warning galvanized our efforts rather than dampening them. Eleanor suggested we investigate the origins of the silver mark itself, a symbol she believed to have ancient roots, predating even the Ashcroft lineage. Our research led us to obscure heraldic archives and forgotten guild records, revealing the mark as an emblem historically associated with the secret order bound by oaths of silence and mutual protection. The order's reach had evidently permeated families of stature, forcing a code that prioritized legacy and discretion over justice. Holmes mused aloud. This order's philosophy is a double-edged sword, protecting its own, but suffocating truth beneath layers of silence. Our inquiries drew the attention of more than just letters and veiled threats. One evening, a mysterious figure shadowed Eleanor and me on the misty streets. Though we lost the pursuer, the encounter underscored the tangible risks we faced. Holmes, ever the strategist, convened a confidential meeting with trusted contacts, spanning our circle cautiously to include experts in cryptography, law, and history. This eclectic team worked feverishly to decode further ciphers hidden within the Ashcroft documents and cross-reference names linked to the secret order. Amid this flurry of intellectual labor, Eleanor uncovered a startling revelation: a ledger from the 18th century detailing a clandestine ceremony, binding the families to the order with oaths sworn in blood and ink, an unbreakable pact that explained the enduring power of the silver mark. Yet, the ledger also hinted at a fracture within, the order of betrayal that had set in motion the decades of secrecy and violence we now sought to unravel. The implications were profound. The Ashcroft mystery was not simply a matter of family scandal, but part of a grander saga of allegiance, treachery, and the price of silence. One evening, as the gas lamps cast flickering shadows upon the walls of Baker Street, Holmes shared a quiet reflection. Watson, the true challenge lies not in uncovering facts, but in navigating the human emotion sphere, loyalty, and despair that these secrets engender. I found myself pondering the many faces we had encountered, those who guarded the past with desperation and those who sought justice with fierce determination. The silver mark was a symbol, yes, but also a legacy of human frailty writ large. Just as we began piecing together the fractured history of the order, a startling event shook our circle. Eleanor received a letter of her own, one that exposed a hidden link to the Ashcroft family and suggested her involvement was deeper than she had revealed. The revelation forced a confrontation among us, fraught with tension and uneasy admissions. Eleanor confessed to a lineage intertwined with the order, a heritage she had kept hidden to protect those she loved. Holmes listened with his characteristic patience, then remarked, "In this dance of shadows, none are free of the past's embrace. Your knowledge is both a gift and a burden, Miss Sinclair. Our alliance, tested and tempered by trust and secrets, held firm. Together, we resolved to confront the final pieces of the puzzle, the truth behind the betrayal that fractured the order, and the consequences rippling through generations. As dawn broke over the city, I understood that the road ahead would demand all our intellect, courage, and resolve. The whispers of the past still echoed, but now, armed with knowledge and unity, we edged closer to a reckoning long overdue. The final days of our investigation unfolded with a quiet intensity, as if the very air around Baker Street had thickened with anticipation. Holmes, Eleanor, and I prepared for what we all knew would be the ultimate reckoning, not merely a resolution of facts, but a confrontation with the human hearts bound by decades of silence and deceit. Our key lay in the ledger. Eleanor had uncovered ancient record of the secret order's founding ceremony and the betrayal that had cleaved the pact. Holmes, ever patient, had traced the threads of that betrayal through centuries of correspondences and whispered confidences, finally zeroing in on one figure whose name had been erased from the public record but lingered like a ghost in private letters. The stage was set to unmask the last keeper of the Silvermark's darkest secret. We arranged a meeting at Ashcroft Manor, inviting the surviving family members and select confidants, including Lady Ashcroft herself, who now carried the solemn mantle of legacy and responsibility. The manor's once oppressive halls felt different now, lighter, yet charged with a somber energy that foretold revelation. Holmes stood before the assembled group, his voice calm but compelling. "You have uncovered a secret older than many of us realized, a secret that shaped the fates of your family and entwined your histories with forces both noble and nefarious." He paused, eyes sweeping the room, finally resting on Lord Ashcroft, who nodded grimly. "Long ago, this order forged a pact meant to secure power and protect its members at all costs. Yet, as with all human endeavors, pride and fear sowed betrayal within their ranks. One betrayed the trust, shattering the bonds and setting in motion a legacy of silence and suffering." Holmes reached into his coat and produced a folded document, an old letter, yellowed with age, bearing a signature barely legible but unmistakable to those present. "This letter," Holmes continued, "reveals the truth about that betrayal and names its author, member of this very family whose actions cast long shadows still felt today." Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the weight of the accusations settled. Yet, Holmes's voice softened. "This is not a condemnation, but a call to acknowledge the past so it may no longer control the present." Lady Ashcroft stepped forward, her expression resolute. "We accept the burden of our history and the necessity of truth." Holmes then addressed the Silvermark itself. "It is a symbol that wielded fear and enforced silence, but it need not remain so. It can also represent courage, the courage to face hidden truths and choose a new path." In the moments that followed, the family and their allies committed to dismantling the old order's secrecy, embracing transparency and restitution. The scars would not vanish overnight, but the first steps toward healing had been taken. As the gathering dispersed, Holmes and I lingered in the manor's library. I asked quietly, "Do you believe this truly ends the matter, Holmes?" He regarded me with a mixture of satisfaction and sober reflection. "Injustice, Watson. There is no final and only continual striving. But this chapter, at least, closes on a note of hope." Walking back to Baker Street through the foggy London streets, I felt the familiar surge of admiration for my friend's unparalleled intellect and humanity. Holmes's genius was not merely in solving puzzles, but in illuminating the fragile, complex heart of human nature. That evening, in our quiet sitting room, Holmes shared a rare moment of philosophical musing. Every case reveals not only the facts of crime, but the deeper truths of character and consequence. Our greatest challenge is to balance reason with compassion. He looked at me, eyes reflecting the flickering firelight. And in that balance lies the true secret one we often miss in the telling. Close my notebook, the story complete, but the journey ever ongoing. Holmes's world was one of shadows and light, mystery and revelation, a world where even the best kept secrets waited patiently for the moment they could no longer remain hidden.